All right. So let's talk through, like, where we got yesterday was fine. Now I need to talk through how this is laid out. So this is going to be just deconstructing the passage. So I think this is valuable because one of the issues that we have is finding right questions, and this is going to walk us through the correct questions to ask. So when we start doing our analysis for Bush and Thatcher, you'll be able to pull this page out and use this as a reference later, right? So what you'll see is that the each paragraph is on here, so you don't have to go back to that original. Oh, sorry, it's not paragraph 2, it's paragraph 1. Right? Yes. You don't have to go back to the passage itself. They will all be in here. And then same thing happens is you see that there's 2 questions, so I go in and I'll divide my question in half, my space in half. And then you can box if you don't have a highlighter, but I'm gonna highlight my labels so that y'all can see like where we're gonna do that. Good? So remember in the beginning of the year when I told you, like, if I don't tell you no 100 times, like, you're not doing something right? Today you should hit at least half of those. Does that build your confidence? No. So we're going to be wrong a lot today. What I want you to work on today is, I'll tell you if it's fluff, meaning like you're not really saying anything. I'll tell you if it's summary. The sooner that we can start recognizing fluff and summary, the sooner we start getting into analysis, okay? All right, so let's read this first one. Certainty creates strength. Certainty gives one something upon which to lean. Uncertainty creates weakness. Uncertainty makes one tentative, if not fearful. And tentative steps, even when in the right direction, may not overcome significant obstacles. Okay, so let's look at the questions as we're working through. And again, they work, like the questions work through chronologically through the passage or through the paragraph. So I'm looking at this as our label, right? Defining definition. So you'll see that like that is taking a label, a noun, and making it into a verb, which is fine if we do that too. Okay, when you go into this, I need you not thinking as a reader. Well, you can, as long as you think of yourself as like a science nerd, right? Or a scientist. So we are only focusing in the realm of scientific research as a scientist. So turn to your partner and talk about why is the definition used in the beginning. It's not to emphasize, it's not to put in the reader's brain. We want to talk the language of science in here. So talk to your partner for about a minute, like why definition. Ready, set, go.
Because you have to have that certain team.
All right. Why use definition? Don't be first period.
Because as a scientist, you have to like be certain about what you're talking about.
Summary.
In science, you want to be like very accurate, so by like setting a definition, he's like kind of structuring his stuff, like making sure that he like kind of is aligning with it and being accurate.
closer.
Create accuracy for trials, like for the.
Well, that's kind of what she is talking about. So think about the scientific process. Where do you begin? Where does it end? What do you need? What must you have? I'm not looking at the words. I'm looking at the label of a definition. Talk to your partner. You got a minute, go. Amina, if you want to move back with them, you can. Peyton. Oh, never mind. I was going to see if to let her work. All right. Try again. Think in the realm of research itself. Where is their value in a definition? Henry?
For certainty and uncertain, like questioning everything by scientific process, so you can like have a question and go off that, not.
Squirrel. Like, going totally around where you need to go.
You have to be starting the process.
Y'all are looking at the words. I'm looking at, yeah, that's summary. I need why is definition valuable?
It like fill the gaps of like assumptions or.
Same thing as certainty and uncertainty. Nope.
Is he kind of like providing a structure to make sure that he's going to be like accurate going through?
Okay. Take that into the steps of the scientific process. Where do you create, where is a definition in that valuable? What must you define in your research or when you start a process?
Like what your goal is? Like,
Okay. That's the end, right? So talk to me, what are components in scientific research? What are things that are in the steps?
Hypothesis.
Hypothesis, what else? Trial and error. Tests. So when you're doing trial and error and you're running tests, where does naming something, defining something come in handy when you're looking at results and data?
Organization.
How do you know your science experiment works? No. When you what?
When you get the outcome you were looking for.
Okay, but how do you know you get an outcome? How do you know you have good data?
Question.
try to use results pretty strong.
Okay. That goes more towards repetition. If you have data, right, you get to the end of an experiment. So you're experimenting and changing something, right? That's the only way that you know. So like if you get to the end of this, at the very beginning of this, where they have no data before, they've got to go through the process. Let's say they get a result. They can't just do the experiment again. They have to change what? A variable. So when they change a variable, then they look back and look at that first example. So that first example, that first set of data is now called their what? Their constant, their control group, right? So then we have to define what are the variables? So by defining, looking at defining, not necessarily certainty and uncertainty, we're starting to define the variables that are in there. So if you look at certainty and uncertainty, which one is the control? Which one is the variable?
Certainty is your control.
Yep. So we're looking at using the definition. You'll hear me say a lot in here. This one's a hard one out of all of them. I think this one's one of the harder ones. You'll hear me say language of like mimics, mirrors, parallels. We'll worry about like how to change that later. But especially when we're trying to show like how it relates to something else. So like the definition is mirroring finding variables and using sorry, a control group that helps to, what is the word I'm looking for, that helps to like validate the data found, right? Because you can do something over and over and over again, but if you don't change any of the variables, then you don't know if what you proved is actually what you need to prove, because you need to change the variables to see like, yes, this is true, like, yes, this works, right? So we said in here that this is your control group or constant. And then uncertainty are your variables. So notice a lot of us were going back to the words. And in this instance right here, the words aren't valuable. I mean, they are. But we're looking at the value of the label, not necessarily the word first, right? Okay, the next question, I never like to analyze what's not there, but you know when we're analyzing multiple choice and we're looking at answer choices, and the hard ones to find examples for or to reason out are the ones that are wrong, right? And we can't just say it's not in there. But looking at this and showing like, why doesn't he begin with talking about scientific research if that's what the whole purpose is? Why does he not begin with talking about the traits of scientific research? Why must he start with defining variables and a constant group? Why can't he start with what's valuable about scientific research or scientists? Talk with your partner. You got like a minute, go. All right, so looking at why does he not begin with his purpose of proving like the characteristics of scientific research? Why does he not start with, here are the characteristics of scientific research. Here's how I characterize it. And then go into the definition. Think about the scientific process, like the research process. What does starting with scientific research and its traits represent in that whole process?
That's what his like conclusion is, like that's like the end. So he needs to like build off of that and like show his like evidence on how he got to
Yeah,
that.
so you don't just, in scientific research, you just go, ta-da, here's my data. This is all right. Like that's the conclusion, right? You've got to show like your work. You got to show the process. So by starting with the definition of the components of scientific research vary areas going through the process instead of starting with the conclusion. So this one is a little bit harder. But notice that like we're not necessarily right now stuck on the idea of certainty and uncertainty. We're just looking at the value of those definitions. If you just start talking about like what the words mean, then you're getting into summary. So as soon as we can kind of start hearing that difference, then it will help. That one's tough. It gets a little bit easier in these next couple. So what is the effect of the repetition at the beginning of sentences or phrases? This type of repetition is known as an anaphora. So we've talked about repetition, but we haven't necessarily talked about repetition and where it is in a sentence or a phrase, right? So this is going to be our example. So you have repetition, but you have repetition at the beginning of sentences or phrases. So let's say you have different pieces of evidence and you have repetition, and one repetition is in the beginning, and then later on in the essay, there's repetition at the end of a sentence. Those two things can be analyzed differently. I don't care about that word. So an anaphora is like the technical language for what that is. That's a rhetorical term, but I don't care about that. A lot of times when kids start using like those old, like the classic rhetorical terms, they get them wrong, and then when I'm trying to read the paper, I don't know what they're talking about because they're using the wrong term. So if you just tell me what you see, I see repetition at the end of a sentence, that's enough, or repetition at the beginning, that's enough for me, okay? So where is the repetition at the beginning? Certainty, certainty, uncertainty, uncertainty. It's important to note that it's at the beginning. So what does that mimic through the process? Talk to your partner, you got like 30 seconds, go. All right. Why? What's the value of the repetition at the beginning of these sentences? What does it mimic?
Like when you are doing your like tests and experiments, you like set it up the same way each time, and then it's like at the start of the thing, so it's like kind of like at the start of the sentence. It's like you're setting it up the same way.
Okay, and why do you have to set it up the same way every time? Because what's
Because
happened?
Then you like if your result's different, then you like limit the like variation and like all your variables. You know like what's controlled. And what's
Okay,
not.
so when you get the data in the beginning, you have to validate that data, you have to repeat it the exact same, and you can't say, oh, step 22, I'm just going to start from there, and then I'm going to work forward. You always have to start at the beginning, right? On the opposite side of that, when an experiment fails or something doesn't get you to the same data that you previously had, what do you have to do? Do what? No? I mean, you can, but where do you have to start? Nope, can't start at the same place, because if you messed up on, or if you got different data starting at like step 22 out of 120,
Like the beginning.
yeah, you have to start back at the beginning. Yeah. So the repetition at the beginning I'm going to use mimics here because we used mirroring before. That repetition at the beginning mimics how scientists must repeat the steps in research to validate the data found or to try a new variable. All of this has to be done from the beginning of the process. Okay, starting to follow a little bit? Okay. Certainty and uncertainty are antithetical. So again, antithetical is like the technical term, the antithesis, right? Basically what you're showing is you're showing opposing concepts or contrasts. So now when we're looking at repetition, we're looking at certainty, right? When we're looking at antithetical, and uncertainty. When we're looking at antithetical, we're looking at certainty together. So, why must you have opposing concepts or things? What does that represent in scientific research?
Results based off the data you use.
So what's being contrasted?
Certainty and uncertainty.
No.
Could certainty mean like a successful result and uncertainty mean like unsuccessful?
So why would you contrast those? Okay. So if we go back to what we labeled as the control group and the variables, right? You have to contrast, and what's being contrasted is the results, the data, right? So the contrast represents the analysis found with each variable or a variable contrast the data from the control group is contrasted to the variables. So if your constant or your control group and you put a variable in, when you find contrasting data, is that successful research? Do you want your research to go back to the control group? No. The control group is supposed to be like, here's what's already happening. Now let's change something in there to make it better, have a different result. So when you're contrasting your data, you do want once you have a control group or an idea, you do want contrasting data because that shows progress in your research, right? So contrasting data so it shows productive research. Your control group is A group gets this medicine. We already kind of know what the outcome is going to be in group A. But the variable, we're going to combine that medicine with another one, that's going to be group B. We don't want group B that has 2 medications compared to the one to get the same results, right? We want it, why would we take more medicine to get the same result? So we want to see if their symptoms, if whatever issue they're having gets better, right? So that control group, when it's contrasting, shows that we're moving in the right direction. Yes? Okay. Turn to your partner. You got like a minute. See if you have any questions on what we're doing so far. All right, what questions? I want us to start seeing that these questions are all based in the label, not necessarily summary of what's being said. So everything has to go back to the label, right? And remember, when we did Bush, we looked at, like when we did analysis, we always looked back at where is our label? Where is our label? So that's what our analysis has to be, is where is our label? When you can find your label in your analysis, that's when you know that you're usually going to stick to analysis instead of just summary of the text. All right, one last thing we need to do is I need us to get through some definitions. So I need 6 people to volunteer to look up these definitions. So computers out. Okay, here we go. I need somebody to do implication. Okay, I need somebody to define passion.
Got it.
Okay, y'all don't be first period. Y'all jump out there. I need somebody to define patience. Okay, I need somebody to define creative. Okay, I need somebody to define self-sufficient. Okay, I need somebody to define courage. Okay. All right. So we're going to get the definition, but I'm going to shorten it a little bit. And this is why, like, we all know what these words mean, but we have to show, like, the nuanced definition of each so they don't kind of just get compiled into the same thing. So implication.
The conclusion that can be drawn from something, although it's not explicitly stated.
Okay, so I just put, I mean, this is what we always do, is like the implication of the label, right? So kind of like deductive reasoning. It is a conclusion drawn. It's never explicit. So explicit means that it's just written out there that that's the conclusion, here's the conclusion. So you're trying to pull the conclusion. All right, we're going to define the trait over here, and then we're going to look at the implication. So passion, what's the definition?
An intense desire or enthusiasm for something.
Oh my God, why can I not write? Okay, so intense desire, enthusiasm. Patience,
The capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset.
the capacity to, what is it, accept or deal with?
Capacity to tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering.
To delay or tolerate without getting angry. It's what I don't have a lot of. All right. Creative.
Having or showing good imagination of original ideas. Or original ideas, sorry.
So I just wrote good imagination, original ideas. Usually when we talk about being creative, the definition I get is thinking outside the box. That, what box? What's in the box? What's out of the box? Right? So I like when we look at this definition because like the idea of original ideas is what we're looking at. Self-sufficient,
Needing no outside help and satisfying one's basic needs.
it's what your parents hope you are when you graduate high school. Courage,
The ability to do something that frightens one.
why can I not spell today, y'all? Ability to do something that frightens you. Okay. We'll continue this tomorrow. All right, keep your brains working. Tomorrow I'll go through. So my thought is that Thursday I'm gone in the morning. I come back like at 11.